All right, well, good morning, early birds. Welcome. Very delighted to have you on campus and glad you've chosen to start your day with the financial aid. We know you had some other options to start your day with, but glad to have you with us. My name is Michael McGinn. I'm a Senior Assistant Director here at the Office of College Aid. I have a couple of my colleagues here with me, Mr. Jaime Gonzalez, who is also a Senior Assistant Director in the Office of College Aid, as well as Ms. Phyllis Franks, who is the Student Accounts Manager in the Office of the Bursar. And so we're going to have two sections of this presentation. I will talk about all things college aid, primarily meaning need-based aid. And then Phyllis will field questions for things like payments and billing. And then we will then have sort of a question and answer session. And then also, if you have some individual questions that are more specific to your situation, and you want to talk one-on-one with us, we'll be available after this presentation as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, I am with the Office of College Aid, which is in Walker, room 309, and that's right across the street in the main quad. Yesterday, we actually had open office hours from 1 to 4. So I'm not sure if any of you had a chance to stop by there, but yesterday was when we had our open office hours. We will also be open first thing tomorrow morning at 8:30. If you are not leaving today and you wanted to stop by our office tomorrow morning, we will have counselors available as well. Our website, financialaid.uchicago.edu. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, first of all, sort of what our mission here is at U of Chicago. Talk a little bit about our No Barriers program, which you probably heard a lot about when you decided to attend U Chicago. And then I'll go into a little more detail about how we actually put the awards together, and then what to do if there's some sort of special circumstance that arises, or one that maybe you have but you maybe weren't able to articulate or weren't able to include on the initial application. So what is No Barriers? So No Barriers is a very exciting initiative that we launched in October of 2014, where essentially the mission was to increase both affordability and access here at the University of Chicago. So what does that mean? Essentially, if you indicated that you were applying for need-based financial aid, then we decided to waive your application fee. Then also, if you were eligible for need-based aid, there is no student loan expectation associated as part of the financial aid package. And in addition to that, we have also enhanced our career initiatives, where each student is paired with a career advisor to help sort of give a tailored plan of where they see themselves going. Even though in your first year that might not be clear yet, we have a very robust career advancement office who can help with things like that. So going back to some of the other topics that I outlined in the beginning, the aid award, essentially, how did we put that together? What was it that led us to the decision that you have received? So what we did was we collected some information from you, primarily the FAFSA, either the UChicago financial aid worksheet or the CSS profile, one of those two forms, and then we asked you for your 2014 tax return, which is actually the prior year tax return. We started doing that with the launch of No Barriers, and as well, the FAFSA is now lined up so that it's a year behind as well. So when you complete the FAFSA for the next year, you will be submitting 2015 information. So when we asked you for the 2014 information, the reason we did that is because that gave us a relatively good picture of your financial situation at the time you applied for admission. If there was a change with your 2015 income that was different from your 2014, we did give you the opportunity to articulate that to us to indicate if there was a big change from 2015 to 2014. So we can work with you in regards to those situations, but in general, we did default to the 2014 tax information for the aid decision. And so essentially what we did was we took the information that you submit on the FAFSA, the CSS profile or financial aid worksheet, and the tax returns, and we came up with a family contribution. That family contribution is comprised primarily of looking at income, assets, household size, and where you're from. Those are the primary factors that go into that determination. So then what we do is we come up with that number, that family contribution, and then we take the cost of attendance, which includes tuition, the student life fee, room and board, orientation fee, and as well as an allowance for books and personal expenses. Then we subtract that family contribution, and then we subtract a work expectation for the student over the summer and then during the year, and then that's how we come up with the University of Chicago need-based grant. Does that make sense? Okay, so, and then, you know, if you have individual questions about that, how we arrived at that, we have financial aid counselors in our office. Like I said, will be available after this presentation, and we can go into that in a little bit more detail. Should you have special circumstances that come along the way, there is an appeal process. Keep in mind that the financial aid decisions are usually based off of a tax year. So if you were to have a change after the first of the year, that is a possibility that we might not be able to make an adjustment until the following year. But the best thing to do is, if you do have some special circumstances that arise, is to give our office a call or have the student come visit us, and then we can sit down and sort of advise on what the most logical course of appeal action that you would have in that particular situation. Okay, so what is it that happens next year? You've got the aid package for this year. You're obviously happy enough with it that you decided to attend here, which is great. What happens in the following year? So essentially what we're going to do is ask for very similar information that we did in the first year. The FAFSA, and then you do not have to do the CSS profile. If you did the CSS profile, great, we would accept it, but we do have our own similar financial aid worksheet that's for continuing students, that's free and simplified. So the nice thing about that is the CSS profile costs $25, and some people it takes 2 or 3 hours for them to fill it out. Our application is free, and it would probably take you 20 to 30 minutes to fill it out, maybe even faster than that. So that was another thing that we wanted to continue with no barriers, is not only in the first year is the aid application process simplified, but it will be that way for all 4 years. So we would ask for the FAFSA, our university application, and then it would be the 2015 tax returns for the following year. Now the FAFSA will actually be available earlier this year. The FAFSA will be available as soon as October 1st, which is a brand new initiative. However, it's not really that necessary as a continuing student that you would do the FAFSA that early. I wouldn't wait too long. It might be a good idea to do the FAFSA, you know, in the winter or something like that if you get the chance to do it, since you already have the tax returns. But it's not critical that you do next year's FAFSA right away on October 1st, even though it would be available. Generally speaking, our continuing student deadlines to reapply are somewhere in the May to June range. Usually we spend a lot of our time in the spring working on prospective student aid decisions, as you saw last spring, and then our returning student decisions are usually configured over the summer. So the idea is, as long as you have a relatively similar financial situation year to year, that you will receive a similar package. There are occasionally factors that would change the aid package. Those would include major increases in income. You know, let's say your income goes up by $20,000, we might not be able to ignore that. And let's say you had 2 in your household that were in college, and then that student was a 4th-year student. That student has now graduated. Now you only have 1 in college. Obviously, there's still a financial responsibility for you for that student that's graduated, but in terms of the way that we do need-based aid, we do look at the students who are in college currently. So those are 2 of the common factors that would cause the change to, you know, an increase in a family contribution. However, by the same token, if there become 2 students in college or your income goes down and you have special circumstances, then the financial aid that you receive could increase based to your favor based off of those circumstances. But however, in general, I would say most of our situations, if the family's income is relatively stable, if there's a small percent increase in income, you should see a family contribution that's relatively the same in years 2, 3, and 4. We might expect the student to work a little bit more over the summer or work a little bit more during the year, vis-a-vis a few $100s more over the summer or a few $100s more during the year. But we don't want you to be in for any surprises unless we think that there's a legitimate reason that the aid package should change. Okay, so those documents will become available on My UChicago, which is the student's account portal, and you'll probably see those available sometime in the winter, spring, so that you can reapply for aid. Then a couple of other topics, study abroad and off-campus living. The university does factor in the fact that you would study abroad as part of your financial aid package. Essentially, the aid package remains relatively similar to what it would be if you were here at UChicago. We wouldn't expect the student to work during the quarter that they would go abroad. It does not cover your travel to go abroad, but in general, the costs for studying abroad are factored into the financial aid decision. Then also in years 2, 3, and 4, if the student should decide to live off campus, we do factor that in as well for financial aid purposes. Okay, so as part of the No Barriers initiative, we do not expect a student to borrow a loan as part of the aid package. However, there may be some instances where you might want to consider borrowing a student loan in an effort to finance the family contribution or the parent contribution. So while there is no implied calculated loan expectation, these are some nice options, should you not have the immediate resources to come up with the family contribution. The Federal Direct Stafford loan is only a 3.76% interest loan, and a first-year student can borrow up to $5,500 in that loan. It can be either subsidized or unsubsidized. Subsidized means that you do not pay interest on the loan while the student is enrolled in school, and then unsubsidized means that the interest does accrue. How we determine that depends on the aid that you're receiving in relation to your federal EFC or family contribution. So if that's something that you might be interested in doing, what I would recommend doing, call our office. We will tell you what your eligibility is, and we will walk you through those steps. Essentially, you complete a paper form, a master promissory note on studentloans.gov, and as well as entrance counseling on the studentloans.gov website as well. Then there's also a federal direct parent loan. The advantage of the parent loan is that there is no cap other than the cost of attendance. So basically you can borrow up to the difference between the cost of attendance minus any other aid that you're receiving, minus the Stafford loan if you decide to go that route. If you're approved, you can borrow in the parent's name up to that cost of attendance, but the interest rate is a little bit higher on those loans, and that loan does check credit for the parent as well. Okay, so last topic before I turn it over to Phyllis is student employment. So as part of your aid package, you may see something called federal work study or student employment on your award. And so if it says federal work study, essentially what that means is you're eligible to work on campus and be paid via paycheck, where a portion of the funds are paid by the federal government and a portion of the funds are paid by the department who employs the student. And then if it says student employment on your award, that means that it's not the same as federal work study, but the student can still work on campus. That eligibility, again, depends on what type of aid that you receive in relation to your federal expected family contribution. So those are where the award items come: student employment on the award or federal work study on the award. However, broadly, student employment, when I'm referring to student employment here, that just has to do with any on-campus work opportunities. And so there is a brand new website that is actually being launched this weekend which is studentemployment.uchicago.edu. And on that website, you will see job postings, both federal work study and non-work study jobs as well. And then there will also be on the website, as well as an email sent to students, if you are federal work study eligible, a federal work study authorization form. Then also of note is that the employers generally ask for what's called an I-9 form, where you just have to document that you're able to work, basically by providing things like a social security card. And then if you do work on campus, then a W-2 form, similar to how all employers release, that those come out after the calendar year ends. And then the other component is that, as I mentioned earlier, career advancement. We have enhanced our career advancement office to help with resources such as resumes, cover letters. So even if that doesn't pertain to finding a job on campus, it could be something that they would want to put together, to show a professor to do research or something like that. But they'll also work with you on resumes and cover letters, for future careers as well. And there will be a session specifically for student employment. And this session will be called Do Good, Gain Experience, Get Paid. And then it says time TBA, but the times just so happen to be from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. and 1:15 to 2:15 p.m. In Ida Noise. Now, it doesn't say exactly what day it is on there. Do you guys know offhand?
Thursday.
It's Thursday, okay.
Thursday orientation.
Okay, so Thursday, we will have our experts in student employment there on campus in two sessions from 12 to 1 and 1:15 to 2:15. So sorry about the confusion regarding that. But anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Phyllis, and she's going to talk about the Bursar related matters, and then I'll come back up at the end and then answer some more questions if you have those. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Phyllis, can I just take a quick, sorry, I didn't make that correction. It's Friday this week, where those work study sessions are.
Can you go back to the slide? I can take a picture for myself.
Which one?
The last one.
The last.
Wrong,
Yeah, the problem.
He will remember.
Those times are correct, but the day is
not there.
not there, unfortunately.
So I'll let you know it's Friday.
Yeah.
It's in the student orientation booklet.
Yeah, it's correct in the booklet. So. Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phyllis Franks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just want to say that it's a pleasure and a privilege to be here with you as a representative of the Office of the Bursar at the University of Chicago. I know that this is and can be a stressful time because I've been through it myself. Last year I dropped off my daughter to college, and it wasn't easy. So I know that you have that going on, as well as a lot of practical matters and questions about how we as partners with you and your students, as well as the Office of College Aid, can allow you to successfully manage your students' account. And that's what I want to talk with you all about today. And I want to start by pointing out this picture to you. It's not a building of the university. It's not students, it's stocks, right? And the reason that we chose this picture is because we've implemented a lot of new systems, and so we liken ourselves to these baby ducks learning how to swim. So I think that we can all relate to that. This is a new experience for you and for your children, and we just want you to know that we, working together, will have a successful management of your student's account. So if you have questions, concerns, we're all here to help. So what do we do with student accounts? Student account is something that gets created when your student arrives on campus. And you can think of it as kind of a clearinghouse where all of the activity in terms of charges, financial aid, and payments all come together on the student's account. And some of our main services to manage the student account and to make it a successful process are student account electronic billing. We process payments. In some cases, we handle third-party billing. So that's if students have or maybe their parents have an employer who's paying a part of their tuition, and the agency gets the bill directly. You might not have that situation in your family, but if you did, we would handle that process for you. And then the next service is, in some cases, when you have the financial aid and student loans that exceeds the charges billed by the Bursar's office, sometimes the student or the parent is eligible for a refund. And in that case, if you are eligible for a refund, or if your student is, we highly recommend that they enroll in direct deposit rather than the paper check process, because direct deposit will allow those funds to be deposited quicker than a paper check. So on average, direct deposit takes 3 to 5 days versus 7 to 10 days for a paper check. So student account billing, you probably have a lot of questions about that. We implemented a new e-bill, e-pay system, and I know that we've had a lot of questions already about what should I pay. So we're going to talk more about that in the next slides. So the first thing that you will want to have your student arrange for you is access to their e-bill. The way that that works is that the students designate you as an authorized payer. And they can authorize up to 10 different authorized payers. So it could be parents, grandparents, other family members. And we have detailed information on our website about that process. But essentially what the student needs to do is go to My UChicago, click on the Finances tab, and then they will see e-bill, e-pay, and then the option to authorize you. And what they're doing is inputting your email address. They create a username for you. So if you have a username that you prefer, tell them what you want them to create for you. Also, with this authorized payer access, you will get an email, and you can also opt into text alerts each time a new bill is generated. And that is part of the steps that your student would choose for you when they're authorizing you. And as I mentioned, students can authorize up to 10 additional individuals. So our website has a lot of information about that process as well as that guide. It's a step-by-step guide for your students, so I think you'll find that very helpful. Okay, so when you look at your bill and you want to know what are the charges on my bill. So we have tuition, student life fee, first year class fee, and the CTA UPass fee. And as well as room and board, and then University of Chicago health insurance, unless you have your own coverage for your student, in which case your student will need to complete the waiver. And the deadline to complete that waiver is September 30th, 2016, which is the Friday of the first week of the quarter. Now, if you've already waived the health insurance, but the charge is still on the bill, you can go ahead and deduct that charge from the bill and pay the lower amount. Just make sure, confirm with your student that they received an email message after they waived out of health insurance. Until they receive that email, they have not successfully waived. So the next section of the bill shows your resources. So that would be financial aid, loans, any 529 payments, and any other payments made on your student's behalf by others. And so what happens, making sure you got time to take that picture. And I do believe this will be online as well, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so how do you know how much is due? Well, if you think back to the previous slide, what we talked about are all of the charges that will be totaled out, and then all of these other categories, financial aid, loans, any payments that you've made will be subtracted from the total charges, and the remaining balance is what is due. So what are your payment options? We have self-payment, and all of this information is also provided in more detail on our website. So e-bill, e-pay, the way that works is when the student gets their bill, they can make a payment themselves, or they can authorize you as a payer, and when you are set up with your account, then you can go and make an electronic payment, an ACH payment through e-bill, e-pay. You can store your banking information there. You cannot arrange future payments through that function, but you can store your banking information, and on a quarterly basis you can just go in and initiate a payment. When you get the e-bill, the text message or the email saying a new bill is ready, it will also include a link which you can store on your computer as a bookmark, and you can go out and initiate that payment. We also have a 10-month payment plan where you can defer the total cost over 10 months. Now the deadline to enroll in that is October 15th. After that, that option won't be available anymore. It does have a $90 enrollment fee, and the way that you set that up is similar to how we determine the balance due. So you can either set up this monthly payment plan for the entire balance due and spread that total over 10 months, or you can set up a monthly payment plan for a portion of that, and you could borrow loans, or maybe you have 529 plan payments coming in to make up the difference. So you determine how much you want to pay through that 10-month plan. And then financial aid and loans, those are other, they're aid, but they do appear on the bill as payment sources as well. And then if there is a third-party sponsorship or contract, that's another method of payment as well. So how do I authorize billing for a payment by a third party? So again, the third party would be an outside agency that requires that they receive a bill directly from our office. And in those cases, what we need for those parties to do is provide us with a contract. And then we provide a great deal more detailed information on our website. And how do you know when your bill is due? These dates are posted on our website, but we have the first bill date, the due date for each quarter's bill listed here. And if you forget these dates, please don't hesitate to go to our website, call us, email us. We're happy to help and answer any questions that you have. Okay, we talked briefly about a refund earlier. So if you're borrowing a Parent Plus loan and that payment exceeds your charges, your direct billable charges, and sometimes that happens if you're borrowing to cover indirect costs like books, personal expenses, or room and board if in future years if your student lives off campus, we will issue that refund to you, the parent, unless you want it to go to the student, in which case we need written authorization from you to do that. If the student is eligible for a refund because their financial aid or loans exceed their charges, we will encourage you to have your child enroll in direct deposit so that those monies can be deposited into the checking or savings account of their choice. If they don't enroll in direct deposit, we will mail a paper check, which takes 7 to 10 days, and that will go to their local address here in Chicago. And that concludes my presentation on how we want to partner with you, the families, your students, our colleagues in financial aid, so that your students will have a positive and successful management of their student account. So I'll turn it over to Michael McGinn, and he can field the questions that you might have about both billing as well as financial aid. Thank you.
Okay, question and answer time. Anybody have any questions based on the information we just discussed? Yes, sir.
I was looking at my bill for this quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have a letter that you will get certain financial aid or something. But I checked with the Bursar yesterday. It's not deposit yet. It's like a big leg or something.
So on the bill that you would receive, there is what's called pending financial aid. So if you have received your aid decision, it should have the pending financial aid that showed as a credit on the first e-bill, which came out on September 1st, but then the actual disbursement of the financial aid will be taking place this week. Does that make sense?
Did you see the pending aid on your bill?
I haven't opened it yet.
You know, oh, okay. You know what?
You're too afraid to open it.
Let me just add to this a little bit. There was some confusion about where to find the bill. So if you're an authorized payer, you will get an email message with a link. And you click on that link and you click on e-bill, e-pay, and open the actual bill. You should pay based on the bill and not what you see listed as the current balance. Due to federal regulations and rules, financial aid cannot actually disperse until this week, as Mike mentioned. So you won't see that aid in the balance. Technically, the balance is correct, but only because the aid has not dispersed yet. So don't go by the current balance. Open up the bill and pay based on what the bill reflects. Now, if you see federal work study listed as a payment on the bill as a credit, there was a little problem with that, and it's not an actual payment that gets applied towards the balance. So you should add that back to the balance due. Now, when students log in to e-bill, e-pay, the first thing they're going to see is on the left side of the screen, the current balance. Tell them to look over to the right where it says your bills and open up that bill that's dated September 1st. And it will section out each of the topics we talked about. Charges, your deposit, your $500 deposit is a credit, any other payments from outside sources, and then the financial aid. And then whatever the balance due is, that's what you should pay. Because by the next week, we'll get your payment, the financial aid will have dispersed, and everything should balance out to zero. Okay?
So that way, when you see that in the winter and the spring, you're not alarmed that if you are on need-based aid, that you owe the full cost of attendance. The only reason is because the financial aid is pending. So when you open that screen, it has that amount, but then when you click on the actual e-bill itself, once you become the authorized user, you should see that. So that probably will look the same in the winter and the spring
Yes.
quarters, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'd like to know we pay in March and after in September. So during the summertime, is the medical insurance covered? How is that?
Yes, the medical insurance it covers you through the student through August 31st.
Okay, August and September starts the new year.
That's right. So it ends August 31st, starts September 1st for the new year.
So even if that I don't make any payment.
Right, you don't, so you pay for health insurance autumn, winter, spring, and you're covered through the summer. That's correct. That's correct.
Question. Other things of interest?
I came a little late. So,
Yeah, sure.
But have we gone through like a different financial loan or something you can get, or is not part of this?
Yeah, no, I did talk about that. I'll go back actually to the, I know you did come in a little bit late. I did have a slide about the federal direct Stafford and plus loan options. And so one of the topics that I covered was that even though as part of your financial aid package, we don't expect the student to borrow as when we calculate the package, there is the option to use a loan to finance the parent contribution if you'd like to do so. And the Stafford loan is the #1 recommendation due to the low interest rate. And that is a student loan that's 3.76% interest. Does not go into repayment until the student graduates, until 6 months after the student graduates. And it can be either a combination of subsidized and unsubsidized or all unsubsidized. Subsidized means that the interest does not accrue while the student is in school, and unsubsidized means that the interest does accrue while the student is in school. So whether it's partially subsidized and partially unsubsidized or all unsubsidized depends on what type of aid package you have in relation to what the federal expected family contribution is. So if you wanted to know what your specific eligibility is, feel free to contact us. But the maximum for a first-year student would be $5,500. So that would be the recommendation on the student side if you did need to borrow.
Just income limit without going into more detail.
There's no income limits for the Stafford loan. It's just that if the subsidized is considered the need-based loan and the unsubsidized is the non-need-based loan. So essentially anybody, even if you don't qualify for significant financial aid or if you don't qualify for aid at all, then you could still borrow up to $5,500 in the unsubsidized Stafford loan.
Yes, I'm asking. Subsidized, I'm sure there must be some limit income.
Yeah, so there's not a specific income limit, but what it really has to do is what's the relationship between what the aid that the school gave you institutionally and what the federal government's EFC is. In some cases, our aid is actually better than what the EFC, the institutional expected contribution, is actually lower than the federal expected contribution. So there could be a situation where even if you receive significant need-based aid, the Stafford loan would be unsubsidized because the school would rather give you more free money than give you an interest-free loan. We'd rather give out the grant because that's the most beneficial thing to the student. So because of our No Barriers initiative, because of some of these enhanced need-based policies we've launched, we do see some students who, because they're receiving significant need-based grants, they're only eligible for the unsubsidized Stafford loan. But we would be able to tell you specifically what you were eligible for, if you contacted us. Does that make sense? It's a little bit complicated and it's a little bit, what would you say, talking shop in the financial aid world.
It's a little gray area, not a black and white.
Yeah, right. I mean, there is some method to the madness behind it, but yes, in general. But that's a very good question. And then the Parent Plus loan is the other piece where if you have good credit, then if you need to borrow more than that $5,500 in Stafford, then you could borrow the difference between the cost of attendance and the other aid that you're receiving up to that full cost of attendance if you needed to do so. And then there are also private loans with the credit-worthy cosigner. These are essentially the federal loans that we put out there because those tend to be a little bit more of known quantities. But you might be able to find a private loan that competes pretty well with the Parent Plus loan. Depends on your credit, the criteria that the lenders use. We don't necessarily recommend one private lender over the other because we don't want to play favorites with the lending institutions, but basically what we see very common, if the student does need to borrow a loan, which ideally as part of our package, they wouldn't have to, but obviously in some situations you might need to, the Stafford loan would be the recommendation to maximize, and then consider either the Parent Plus loan or a private loan with the creditworthy cosigner.
So when you decide the need-based loan, a lot of Harvard or a couple of other people has a criteria that the parents should not pay more than 30% of their total salary or 40% something. Do you guys have some criteria like that?
It's not exactly the same as that, but we have beefed up our need-based aid package so that we don't include a loan. We don't include home equity as part of the calculation. We used to do that. And in divorce situations, we don't include the non-custodial parents. So there isn't exactly the same thing as like a Harvard where they say, you know, we expect you to, if you know your income's between this and this, then you pay 10% of the income. But we're finding that our need-based aid packages are very close and very competitive with what they're coming up with. Even though it's not that exact same formula, we have enhanced it quite a bit. And one of the other nice things we've done is we've said, if you bring in any outside scholarships from you know a local high school or some sort of civic organization, we're not going to reduce our own university gift aid unless that aid, when combined with your other aid, exceeds the cost of attendance. So let's say you had a $10,000 family contribution. You could literally receive $10,000 in outside scholarships without us reducing any of the need-based aid. So we've really done a lot, I think, in the last couple of years to try to make things more generous, to be on par with some of the things that those Ivy League schools are doing. I'm not sure if you know their outside scholarship policies are as generous as ours. So that gives you a little bit of
I was
context.
just looking at, like, do you have some like standard number, the 30% of the total income?
Well, they're basically, we take the income on a sliding scale, and it depends on how high your income is. But we also have something called a net price calculator on our website, where you could sort of plug in income figures and you could kind of see how it works a little bit. You could sort of see, okay, what would a $10,000 increase in my income do? What would a $10,000 decrease do? So it's not an exact, we take 30% of income. It depends on, it's a little bit on a sliding scale depending on what your income is. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Good questions. Other questions? Yes. Yeah.
For the next year's aid package renewal,
Yeah.
and I jot down the decision time would be May or June next year, right? After the
That's usually when you would reapply. You might not receive your decision until July or August the following year, in the summer. Yeah, because essentially we do spend a lot of our time working with prospective families in the spring, and then we do the renewals over the summer. So right now what we're doing is we're finishing up our last minute renewal applicants, people who have applied a little bit late for the aid. So as long as you get things in on time, you should hopefully get something in that July-August range. That's the idea.
Oh, okay. So as far as the paperwork application part, we need to finish by
Usually May-June range. I don't know exactly when the deadline was, but this year it was early June.
June. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That brings a real good question.
Yeah,
This year FAFSA rule has changed.
right.
So you go prior to 2 year or something. Like let's say this is 2016.
Right.
So 2016 and 17 aid, you look for 2015 tax return. Am I correct?
So, yeah, well, actually for this year, for the 2016-17 year, we only asked you for the 2014 tax return. But then the next year for the 17-18, we would ask for 15. However, if you had special circumstances, I covered this a little bit before you came in, but just to recap, we would ask for 2015 tax information because that's what the FAFSA asked for. But if you had a situation where 2016 was radically different than 2015, we could look at that on a conditional case-by-case basis.
So you guys going to go pretty much like 2 years back kind of thing,
Right,
Then
prior,
come up
you'll hear,
FAFSA and
yeah,
everything.
you'll hear the term prior year or early FAFSA. That's sort of the way that all financial aid is going, and we've been actually doing that for the most part for the
So you
last
guys
couple
are
of
the leader
years.
in that one compared to like
We-
you are already looking 2014,
Right.
2016, 15 for 17,
Right.
and 16 for 18 kind of.
Right, and so for families that have a relatively stable financial situation, that works very well for both parties because you can get us the tax information faster and the school can get the information easier. For families who have more fluctuating circumstances, it does prevent a few more challenges, but we're also willing to think outside the box and look a little bit more towards your current situation if there is a reason, why you think that we should do that. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, perfect.
Great. Other things? Okay, well, we'll be around, for the next 10, 15 minutes if you want to ask any individual questions. But again, thank you and welcome, and thank you for choosing to start your day with us. Okay,
Thanks for your time.
sure, absolutely.
Thank you.